remember that shit? That shit crazy, man.
Get off the car right now.
Damn, bro. Can't be sliding up on me like that,
Go
man.
on with your kinfolk.
God damn,
Where you at on?
Out there, bro. Man, I was watching these videos from back in the day, man.
Oh, man. You gonna get on my feels, brother.
I'm just saying, nigga, nostalgic right now, man. This shit crazy, bro. I used to get it in back in the day, bro.
You was getting it in, bro?
I was getting it in back in the day, bro.
What, getting it in?
Bro, I had hoes, I was out there riding on circuits, man.
What ride, my G? What ride?
I was riding like a motherfucker.
I was riding like a Mac with the slap in the back. I was riding in the trap with the strap on my ass. I was riding with your hoe, drop in the out. I was riding with my folks getting dope. Niggas know I was riding on them suckers. I was riding on them buses. I was riding with a bus, starving, hungry motherfuckers. I was riding like a motherfucker. I was riding like a motherfucker. I was riding, you was lying, you was a perpetrator.
Look at it.
I was out there looking for you like the Terminator. I was high, geeked up, had them dizzles in my system. Had the bitch believing in me, man, like I was her religion. Yeah, money and house. I had them ball. What do you know? I'm still at it, dog. Like the blunt, burn rubber, fitting that cut loose. Playing with your bitch here while she duck, goose. Got my nigga Schmidt rock, Molly the new Rick rock. Got the game on zip rock. If you hating, bitch, stop. We was hiding, we was riding on them busters. We was hungry, we was eating. What's for supper? That's for supper. We was salivating when we cooked the beef. Kitty cat get activated, man. When she look at me, I was riding like a passenger, macking ass vernacular. I think that's what attracted her. The profit is spectacular.
I was riding like a Mac with the slap in the back. I was riding in the trap with the strap on my lap. I was riding with your hoe, she blowing dro in the O. I was riding with my folks getting dope. Niggas know I was riding with my niggas. I was riding with my bitches. Windows tinted, lane switching, getting riches, representing. I was riding, Paul. I was riding like a motherfucker. I was riding, Paul. I was riding like a motherfucker. I'm riding around with my Brody. We number 8, 24, 34. That's Shaq and Kobe. Fairfield, California stunts. Cash money style, I rock ice. Not talking New England when I say me and solid. Going Yankee at the stoplight. You mean New York? Put a cork in it and do your homework. I guess I'm a teacher, reeling and dealing these lessons. Yes, my rock is a blessing. Getting hit with a death stare from folks at the sidewalk. On my dear silent type, I ain't stressing. I kill 'em with kindness, that's my murder talk. Smash in on the freeway, don't care what's on the odometer. Tied it up, thick baddie right over there. Oh yes, I'm under her. Speakers on blast like a shotgun was built in. I'm an architect, constructing my L's to W's, built for wins. I'm a winner, baby. Victories is all I eat when it comes to dinner, baby. I was riding, reclining, smooth sailing, windows up. I was riding, reclining, smooth sailing, windows up. I was
riding like a Mac with the slap in the back. I was riding in the trap with the strap on my ass. I was riding with your hoe, drop in the out. I was riding with my folks getting dope. Niggas know I was riding on them suckers. I was riding on them buses. I was riding with a bus, starving, hungry motherfuckers. I was riding like a motherfucker. I was riding like a motherfucker.
What's good, everybody? This is better mute button. What's good with y'all, man? That video was from So Solid, the Prophet. He be in the chat. This dude right here, that dude right there, my man's my boy. Man, the man got flows, man. Flows in production and beats. So make sure y'all follow him on all music streaming platforms. I think he on everything: YouTube Music, iTunes, Spotify, SoundCloud. That man on everything. Make sure y'all check him out. That's my guy right there. Who we got in the building for this read? It is Wednesday night, so it is time for some reading. So Solid probably in and out of here. I don't know. Oz, how you doing, sis, Sissy Pooh? ATX, how you doing? What's good with you, Tex? My brother. Tap, what's happening with you, my boy? Romelo's in the building. He said, don't mind me. Marcus, good brother. How you doing, bro? How you doing, man? How you doing? Rush Enterprises in the building. How you doing, bro? I don't know where you watching me at, but it's not YouTube. But if wherever you watching me at, I appreciate you. So Solid. Tap asks you, where you from, dog? Romelo, appreciate you, bro, with the 5-piece coming through. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, there he is. So Solid. People got questions. He got answers. And Mark is in the building. So y'all know where we at, man. Y'all know what time it is. It's time for that read, Self-Made Man. Let me correct myself because I forgot to put up something. Y'all bear with me. Where is it at?
Norah Mary Vincent was an American writer. She was a weekly columnist for the Los Angeles Times and a quarterly columnist on politics and culture for the national gay and lesbian news magazine, The Advocate. She was a columnist for The Village Voice and Salon.com. Her writing appeared in The New Republic, The New York Times, The New York Post, The Washington Post, and other periodicals. She gained particular attention in 2006 for her book, Self-Made Man, detailing her experiences when she lived as a man for 18 months. The experience led Vincent to have a nervous breakdown, and she fell into a deep depression. Norah was a radical feminist who believed that men had a much easier life than women. She set out to prove that hypothesis by disguising herself as a man for 2 years. In her book about the experience, she explains that she actually learned that men have it harder. In fact, the experience was so bad, she had to stop at 18 months because she was starting to hate women due to how badly the women treated her when they thought she was a man. Vincent also stated that she had gained more sympathy and understanding for men and the male condition. Men are suffering. They have different problems than the women have, but they don't have it better. They need our sympathy, they need our love, and they need each other more than anything else. They need to be together. Norah died by assisted suicide at a clinic in Switzerland on July 6, 2022, aged 53. Her death was not reported, however, until August 2022.
Yeah, we're reading. That's the book we're reading, guys. Self-Made Man by Norah Vincent. We left off last week on page 86. We got an hour worth of reading. So 9:07. I'll let you guys go on about your day or your evening or whatever you're doing. Let's get into it. Y'all know we like reading because reading is fundamental. Page 83. I'm sorry, guys. I said 86. I became a regular at the local, going on as many nights as I could over the course of several weeks, sometimes with Jim, sometimes alone. I met Gina on my first night out with Jim. I had been to the local a couple of times before on my own, but hadn't stayed long. Early on, I found it hard to make myself go to these places at all, much less regularly. They depressed me so much, it would take me days to recover from a single jump. Jim took a shine to Gina right away because she had large breasts. She had big boobies. He liked big tits. And because she did this thing when she danced, when she put her tit in her mouth and bite the nipple, pulling back and forth on it with her teeth for a good 15 seconds and stretching her flesh like pizza dough. Jim liked that a lot. Ouch, was all I could think. Gina was a tiny woman, 5 feet tops, And aside from her double deep breasts, she was built like a 16-year-old gymnast. Her ass was high and tight without a hint of cellulite. She got bars. And the only signs of the life she lived were the clutch of stretch marks on her belly, which was otherwise as firm and juvenile as the rest of her. She claimed to be 34, which may have been a lie, but she could pass for it in the dark. She said she had 3 sons, 2 teenagers, and a 3-year-old. She had been dancing since the age of 18, the year she had her first child. I'd assumed that had been her reason for starting, but she claimed not to have needed the money. She had grown up with her grandparents in a wealthy suburb, and though not rich themselves, they had been well enough off to give her what she needed. She maintained that even now she didn't do it for the money, but if that was true, and not just some lines she handed us, then her life was a whole lot sadder than I thought. When I asked her why she danced at the local, as if she didn't really need the money, she said simply, I love men. Even if this had been true when she started out, which was doubtful, it certainly wouldn't have remained so in this of all places. It was a little like saying you became a coroner because you were a people person. The more we talked, the more I was struck not by her purported love of men, but by her apparent distaste for women. She talked about women's parts as if they were garbage. She found them repellent, she said, and far from finding the men she pleasured disgusting. She wondered why they didn't find her disgusting. She couldn't understand, she said, why anyone would want to get within a mile of a pussy. She went on about this for a while, for too long, screwing up her face as she said, wet, sloppy pussy, ew. It didn't even surprise me that she was filled with self-loathing. Everyone in this place was. But the vehemence of her expressed dislike for the female anatomy and her abiding love of men as a so-called species gave me the impression that she was working pretty hard to cover over something traumatic from the past or to repel her true feelings about the present. But then I guess that went with the territory. Hi, just how you doing? Thanks for coming through. She wasn't going to let me or any other customer know what she was really thinking. Deflecting the truth was part of the biz, integral to the whole show we were putting on for each other. Nobody came here looking for reality. Obviously, everyone came to escape it. And maybe to these guys, and a lot of guys, this seemed like fantasy land. But in reality, it was the exact opposite. It was as real and ugly as it got, right down to the stretch marks in the careworn sofas. It was far uglier than all, but the ugliest of life out there. Walking into one of these places wasn't an escape. It was like walking into the gritty subconsciousness, the very place most people were trying to avoid in the first place. I'm hot and wet, Gina said. She said that a lot whenever there was a lull in the conversation. I'm so horny, she added, reminding us that the relief for her condition was only a couch away. Then she segued into something neutral, like the pool game Jim and I were playing, as if that were just the normal flow of conversation. I shoot at the 5 in the side pocket if I were you. If you put a little backspin on it, that'll give you a nice lead for the 7 up in the corner. She professed to be a shark, and I didn't doubt it. She lingered with us at the table for a few minutes, calling shots and watching us miss most of them. She was a good saleswoman, the only stripper I met who could really play the game with any conviction. Unlike the other girls, who did little to conceal their dislike for you in the whole job, Gina was pretty good at pretending she liked you. Like the consummate politician, she remembered your name from night to night and even wave and shout encouragement as you at you from the stage when you were shooting for the 8 ball. She'd come over between dances and put her arm around you and chat and make you forget for a few minutes that this was all just a transaction. She climbed into my lap one night, wrapping her legs around my waist and her arms around my neck as I sat on a stool by the pool table. "How you doing, Ned?" she said, smiling. I usually dreaded these interactions with other strippers. They solicit you at the bar with their tits in their hands, sometimes with semi-sneers on their faces, and ask you how you were, often in the most hostile and obviously uninterested way. You'd have to pretend along with them, cracking that stiff smile, and make a little small talk before you put $1 in their cleavage. Sometimes certain strippers latched onto me, holding my hand against their breasts for a good minute while they spoke about whatever came to mind. Usually, what came to mind was how long and tiring a day they had. They probably did it hoping for another deposit from someone who looked like a sucker. But sometimes I wondered if I could feel a little desperation in it and a faint ring of truth when they'd say, "Can I take you home with me?" Or when they'd stroke my hair and say, "You're so sweet, such a baby face. How old are you?" It didn't matter what they said. It all made me feel bad. I didn't like being their client. I didn't like how they disliked me because of it. Most of all, I didn't like how much I identified with that dislike and how much it made me want to assure them and myself that I wasn't like the other patrons. But sometimes, when I've been playing the wrong role for long enough, that was hard even for me to believe. After all, I was there more often than most of them were, and just being there, for whatever reason, made me feel like I was lying to myself about not belonging. But when Gina got in your lap, she didn't hold out or expose her body parts for tips. She'd just sit there and talk to you as if she'd known you all your life. There wasn't much to say, just pleasantries, but it didn't feel forced. It was disarming, and as distant as I was from real interest, I bought into the emotional fantasies a little, out of the relief mostly. For once, someone made it easy to just talk for a minute like two people who enjoyed each other's company. What's good, D? Thanks for coming through. All of this was designed to get you in the back room eventually. She wasn't pound foolish. She knew that if she just worked you like a mercenary, like most of the other girls did, she'd only get a few singles out of the encounter. But if she played you like a schoolgirl crush, she'd probably score at least a 20, maybe more, on a lap dance or two before the evening was out. And that's what usually happened. I watched her work, and I saw her disappear into the couch room far more often than the other girls, some of who were significantly younger than she was. The first time I watched her go back there, she went with a guy who looked like Papa Hemingway, except that he was dressed in business attire, a white button down, navy dress trousers, and wing tips. Gina liked to use the couch nearest the door. It was perpendicular to the door, and it jutted out a little past the door frame. Because the black curtain across the door extended only 3/4 of the way, you could see or surmise a lot of what was happening behind it. I could see Gina's legs. She was kneeling between Papa Hemingway's wingtips, her tiny bare feet curled under her on the floor. As she did her thing, her feet curled and uncurled rhythmically in time with Papa Hemingway's right foot, which was tapping softly on the floor, as if to a slow beat. She'd kick off her shoes at the door. One of them had fallen on its side. Next to them was a pile of cash, Gina's take. The picture of all this, the corner of the couch, your shoes artfully kicked off, the cash on the floor, Gina on her knees and Papa wingtips astride her, would have made the perfect advertisement for this place in all its sordid glory, or something you would have seen in Playboy as a cartoon, with the caption above it saying, "I'll be home soon, honey." A big biker guy in leather and denim with a Charles Manson beard and a lot of piercings in his face sat just outside the couch room. taking the money as the girls came and went, and peeking behind the black curtain periodically to make sure everything was copacetic. Hey, Tay Tay. How you doing, Sissy Pooh? I would have said he did it for titillation too, but from the bored expression on his face, I got the feeling that once you've been in one of these places for a while, the sight of tits and ass and simulated coitus didn't do much for you anymore. It was like porn or violence in films. Seeing all this day in and day out, you become so inured to everything these places were selling, nudity and beer and 2-bit orgasm, that you have to keep upping the ante to feel anything at all. Fantasy is a necessary veil, and when you rip it away, the opposite of what you think will happen happens. Gratification kills desire, and constant gratification kills it permanently until even naked, willing women seem made of cardboard. At some point, all of this ceased to be about desire, as if it was ever really about desire in the first place, and became about something else: loneliness, or inner pain, or doing time or penance for some long ago hurt that had never healed but somehow found companionable misalliance here with all the other misfits and detritus. I don't think anybody in that place was really capable of normal arousal anymore. They were dead inside, and you can see it. They were in pain and sitting with it, looking for it, maybe even getting off on it. Because when pleasure is used up, pain is all that's left, and it's the only thing that lasts longer. This place wasn't just where men came to be beasts. It was also where women came to exercise some vestige of sexual power in the most unvarnished way possible. My pussy for your dollars. I say when, I say how, I say how much, and I get paid for it. There was tremendous manipulation built into the rules under which these places operated. The provision against touching the girls could be bent or broken at will by each individual girl, and enforced by guys hired for the purpose. Guys like the Piers biker at the couch room door. This was an age-old whore Johnny pimp dynamic, but more played at than truly enacted, and always in a controlled setting. It was grotesque parody of what women and men did in real life. The mating dance with all the civilized pretense stripped away. Hey, Kasim, how you doing, bro? It was an unpleasant scene. There was a lot of anger in those rooms, and Amos was always simmering beneath the surface. With the exception of the frat boy types who came in packs, and then only to the higher profile places, most of the men at the local came alone and sat along nursing a beer or a whiskey. Everything about them said, "Yo, don't bother me." They just slouched there, watching the stage, leaking bad vibes like slow radiation. Even the girls often failed to wring a smile out of those glowering types, which explained why so many of them had given up trying long ago and now came across like disgruntled cashiers at the all-night grocery. That's about as much enthusiasm as anyone had for the process. Cash in, cash out. Beer in, piss out. Leave me alone. Like I said, this was not Fantasyland. The only time Jim and I ever struck up a conversation with another patron at the local, the guy started belly aching right away about how the titty bar was just an expensive cock tease. He pointed to the pile of singles lying in front of him on the bar, telling us how it had dwindled from 20 to a few measly bills in a mere half hour. Jim commiserated in jest, pointing out our own diminished stack, and suggested that, yeah, maybe getting a mail order bride was a better idea. Not really, the guy said. I read about a guy in a paper the other day who got himself one of those. And one day he came home from work and found her fucking the neighbor. So he took her outside into the street right then and there and bashed her head in. The way he told it, It sounded like the moral of the story was that live-in whores are more trouble than they're worth. Not exactly a surprising or minority opinion in that crowd, but jarring enough to put you off a propensity for chit-chat. After a few weeks of going to the local on a regular basis, I got to the point where I just couldn't make myself go anymore. It was too much. All the all the accumulated pain of the despicable patrons who had nowhere else tolerable to go, and the injured dancers who could hardly contain their despair, and the surly bartenders who made shit tips. It all just fell down on you and piled up around you like the ashen, boozy smell of the place until you just didn't want to do it to yourself anymore. Lady Navor, how you doing, sis? Excuse me. Toward the end of our time together, while we were having a drink at the regular bar that he liked to frequent, Jim confessed that he was beginning to feel the same way. Yeah, he said, I'm kind of through with those places for a while. They give me bad dreams. He told me a few weeks before about a particularly vivid and disturbing dream he had about going back into the couch room with Gina, only to find that there were no couches back there at all. Instead, there were only bathroom stalls with no doors and dirty old toilets in them. He dreamt that she was blowing him on one of the toilets. He said he woke up feeling really disgusted and disgusting. All I could think was how appropriate. Unlike most of those purgatorial scumbags, he knew this place for what it was, and that, for all his flaws, was why I liked him. I've been inside a part of the male world that most women and even a lot of men never see, and I've seen it as just another one of the boys. In those places, male sexuality felt like something you weren't supposed to feel but did, like something heavy you were carrying around and had nowhere to unload except in the lap of some damaged stranger. And then only for 5 minutes. 5 minutes of mutual abuse that didn't make you feel any better. One thing was certain, though. Everybody got his hands dirty, and politically speaking, nobody really came out ahead. It was nearly so simple as men objectifying women and staying clean or empowered in the process. Nobody won. And when it came down to it, nobody was more or less victimized than anyone else. The girls got the money, the men got an approximation of sex and flirtation. But in the end, everyone was equally debased by the experience. Everyone, no matter what his or her circumstances were, had made the choice to be there. And chances were that choice was made in the context of a lifetime's worth of emotional wreckage that had been done to their lives by people of both sexes long before they stepped through the door. Whenever I think about my experiences in these places now and the profound pity they aroused in me, I remember something that Phil said the first night when we went to the Lizard Lounge together. It was something that shocked me far more than the sudden vehemence of his guy talk about what women were for. And it was something that I now realize could have applied to the men in those places just as much as to the women. And I quote, I go to some of these bars, he said, and this is the family man in me. And I say to myself, these girls were somebody's daughter. Somebody put them to bed, somebody kissed them and hugged them and gave them love, and now they're in this pit. Or maybe someone didn't, I said. Yeah, he nodded. I've thought about that too. Clarence, what's good? So she got an interesting take. Me personally, you know, to put my personal spin on it, I hate strip joints. I hate strippers, right? I feel strippers are a waste of money and time. But I understand why some people do it, right? It's just not for me. So my question is this: with a woman's perspective, suppose, you know, we can look at that, right? So solid facts or not, right? So with that being said, right, how can women enjoy male strip clubs? right? I know I didn't post this before, right? But seeing is how this is what a woman thinks, right? And I understand we being very specific, right? This is her book and her thoughts. How can women enjoy strip clubs, male strip clubs? Just a thought. We on page 4. Love, Love. Love. I thought dating was going to be the fun part, the easiest part. Certainly, as a man, I had romantic access to far more women than I ever did as a lesbian. And this felt like the best of all possible booms. I could partake at last in the assumption of heterosexuality and ask out any woman I liked without insulting her. Of course, I was in for a mountain of rejections and the self-hatred that came with being the sad sack pickup artist, the wooing barnacle that every woman is forever flicking off her sleeve. So Solid said hookers are better. Sadly, that's how it went for Ned most of the time at first when he tried to meet strange women in single bars. As I would soon learn, that's how it went for most guys. It was just the way of the things in the wild when you were a male. You were the eager athlete, the brightly colored bird doing the dance, and she was the German judge, begrudging you the nod. To be a guy, I had to get out there. I had to play the game as it was played, no matter how bad it felt. But I figured it couldn't hurt to enlist a compatriot for support. She needed a wingman. You got to have a wingman, right? So I asked a friend, Curtis, to be my backup. He was perfect for the job. He was a handsome, well-built, gregarious type, secure and sensible enough not to take himself too seriously or care much what a stranger might think of him. He had agreed to help me navigate the scene and work with me on my male cues, which were still in need of some fine-tuning. I was never quite sure, for example, exactly how low to pull my baseball cap over my eyes. I still talked too much with my hands, and sometimes I still applied my chapstick with a girlish lip smack. Just the day before, while out shopping at a department store as Ned, I had rubbed the insides of my wrists together after applying cologne at the men's fragrance counter. The woman behind the counter narrowed her eyes at me and then looked away as if she had seen something indecent. I needed another pair of eyes to correct me on stuff like this, stuff I did without thinking. Curtis had said he would nudge me when I got out of line. He spent our first night together kicking me under the table. We went to several places that night, all of them neighborhood watering holes that cater to young professionals who are either on the prowl or just out for a booze up with friends. At the first place, an upscale sports bar, I was ready to launch with abandon. Though Curtis tried his best to dissuade me, he knew better, having come of age in a man's skin. He's gotten his nose pushed in one too many times after charging horns first at an aloof beauty. He didn't recommend that practice. But I was on a tear, eager to test my new treads, right? See, she was a girl, so she thought she understood women better than the man did, right? She thought she knew what to say, what to look for, right? So she was ready to jump in that pot. But I was on a tear, eager to test my new treads. So as soon as we sat down, I picked out a couple of 20-something women sitting at a table across the room. I gave them a few lingering looks to check their interest. I caught one woman's eye and held her gaze for a second, smiling. She returned the smile and looked away. That was signal enough for me, so I stood up, made my way over to their table and asked them whether they wanted to join us for a drink. No thanks, one of them said. We're on our way out in a minute. Simple enough, right? A brush off? No biggie. But as I turned away and slumped back across the room towards our table, I felt like the outcast kid in the lunchroom who trips and dumps his tray on the linoleum in front of the whole school. Rejection sucked. You see, she ain't account for that CB, right? She ain't account for that blocker. right? Ain't nothing sweet about it. Try again, man, Curtis urged. Come on, don't give up so easily. Near our table, there was a group of 3 women at the bar, clearly friends, chatting among themselves. He pointed in their direction. He said, right there, that's perfect. Go for it. All right, I said. Jesus, this really sucks. Yeah, well, welcome to my world, he said. I swore under my breath as I got up to go. Curtis crossed his arms and leaned back against his chair, smirking. When I reached the bar, I could see that these women were absorbed in their conversation. I was going to have to interrupt, and the female me knew that my approach, no matter how unassuming, would be perceived as a little pathetic and detestable. Small-shouldered guy sidles up to cute chicks with a can line and a huge hole of obvious insecurity gaping in the middle of his chest. I stopped at the thought of this. I didn't want to be that guy, the nuisance guy that women always dread. I was embarrassed for myself. But then, how to retreat with dignity? I was already lurking awkwardly behind them, lamely pretending to flag down the bartender. As I leaned toward the bar with the bill in my hand, the woman turned to look at me, the way you do when something unremarkable enters your peripheral vision. Their eyes took me in like a billboard on the highway, running the length of me, then moving back to the point of interest elsewhere. Succinctly, I was put in my place, stuck there with no recourse. I thought about what I could say that wouldn't sound cooked up, cheap, or presumptuous. I decided it was best to be honest. I always respected that in men who had approached me. I had once given my number to a young businessman on the street in New York simply as a reward for having had the balls to put himself out there and ask me for my number. I had no intention of going out with him, which, in retrospect, I see wasn't fair. When he called, I had to tell him I was a lesbian, which, like most interested men, he refused to believe was a real, sustainable state of being. Why'd you give me your number then? He asked finally. Because I was proud of you, I said. Now, at the bar, it was my turn to make myself proud, or at least fend off crushing defeat. I decided, however, that Curtis was going to have to do his job on this one, so I went back to our table and yanked him up. You're coming with me, I said, dragging him across towards the bar. He had a self-satisfied look on his face. He was enjoying himself at my expense. He knew he was teaching me a lesson, and he was relishing every second of it. When we got to the bar, the women were absorbed as ever in each other, huddled together, trying to talk over the music. We entered their orbit abruptly. Me still half dragging Curtis by the arm. I tried to smooth over the breach. Hi, ladies. Ladies, Jesus. I'm sorry to interrupt, but I wanted to meet you. I didn't mean to be a pain in the ass about this. God, I was begging already. But my name's Ned, and this is my friend Curtis. Curtis and I had joked that he would play my wingman at times like this, my conversational stopgap. Like typical guys, we found the Top Gun humor disappropriately funny in this context. It made us feel better at the downsizing we knew we were letting ourselves in for. At first, the 3 women looked us over like inferior produce in the supermarket. Then they smiled weakly. They were well brought up. They knew enough to cover quickly with the kind of anemic politesse that we all use on boards at cocktail parties. We were in, but I can see that their patience was thin. I focused on the woman on the left who said she had gone to Princeton and was working in a foreign policy think tank. I decided to drop the novelist persona that I adopted as cover with my bowling buddies and switch to talking about my recent job as a political columnist. I thought that would make for common ground, which in part it did, but only for the nodding variety. Right? Oh, you write about politics? She wasn't going to bite. As I talked on, trying to work with her clip responses, I found myself, as I had on my first trip to the bar, Switching again to her point of view, seeing how protected she seemed, I remember how protective of myself I had often been in encounters with strange men. I had always made the same assumption, one that my brother Ted had ingrained in me as a young teenager. All guys who make advantage to a woman only want one thing, to get in her panties. I remember him saying, it doesn't matter what they say. Shit, they'll say anything. Just remember, they only want one thing. That's how guys are. I took that assessment at face value, an assessment that was, I have to admit, mostly borne out by my experience in college, where I found that most young men who bothered to speak to me at parties did indeed only want one thing. To the rest of them, I was invisible. Why bother? I guess they figured if you don't want to fuck her. Whatever veneer a man pasted over this intention, and it wasn't usually a very artful one, I always knew or thought I knew what he was after. I realized, treated most men with the same coldness that these women were showing me. And there lay in the paradox for me. Even if, and this is an enormous if, it could be argued that most guys who chat up strange girls in bars or on the street only want one thing. It was equally true that I wasn't most guys. I was a woman with a woman's sensibilities. Besides, I didn't want to sleep with them. They were just another test case. But still, it didn't feel good to be on the receiving end of their suspicions. After all, there are plenty of guys in the world, the marrying kind, I suppose, who really just want to get to know a girl, but have no other means of doing so except to strike up a conversation on the fly. So should they bear the brunt of the majority of their sex's bad behavior? And was the majority really that badly behaved? There I was, caught square in the middle of the oldest plot in the world. He said, she said. It was the woman's job to be on the defense because past experience had taught her to be. It was the guy's job to be on the offense because he had no choice. It was that or never meet at all. It's a wonder that men and women ever get together. Their signals, by necessities, are crossed. Their behaviors at cross purposes from the start. I was beginning to feel happier than ever to be a dyke. As a woman, it was a lot easier to meet women because even in a dating situation, there was always the common bond of womanhood, the common language of females that often make even strange women able to chat amiably with each other, almost from the moment they meet. I wondered if the same thing would happen here. Would these women lower their defenses if they found out I was a woman? After another 10 minutes of condensation, condescension. Yeah, condescension. I said sation. Condescension. I realized that this was going nowhere and that I might learn more about Ned if I let them in on the gag. I had to repeat the phrase, I'm really a woman, 4 times before they got what I was saying. There was a moment of absolute stunned silence, and then the inevitable. No way, they said in chorus. Then, with startling quickness, we all began chatting like hens. Their aloof facade fell away, and not, I sensed, just because of the conversational fascination of the disguise, but because they felt disarmed enough, knowing that I was a woman, to let me in. The inclusion was even physical. When I approached as Ned, they had been sitting facing the bar. They had only bothered to turn halfway around to talk to me, their faces always in the profile. Now they turned all the way around to face me, their backs to the bar. I understood this reaction immediately. I had predicted it, but still a part of me resented their prejudices. I was still the same person I had been before, and you still wanted some pussy. I'll put that in. I'll put that in. Just as any given strange man is a person beneath his blazer or his baseball hat. As a woman, I was accepted. As a man, I had been rejected yet again. I understand intimately the social region for this, but it seemed unfair all the same. Poppy Blanco, what's good, my guy? Just reading a little bit. So Solid said, I've been in the game so long, I forgot how difficult it first was, a young buck trying to get at the ladies. I can't imagine how it is for youngsters in the 2024 with terms like cold approach. Teresa Lee, how you doing, sis? Hey, so Solid, she batting for the same team, bro. Let's keep it gangster. Everything's everything, Poppy Blanco. How you doing, God? Be original in the building. We on page 99, guys. We moving right along. As Curtis and I said goodnight and walked away, I found myself thinking about rejection and how small it made me feel and how small most men must feel underneath the weight of what women expect from them. I was an actor playing a role, but these women had gotten to me nonetheless. None of these interactions mattered. I had nothing real at stake, but still, I felt bad. So, how must men feel when it's a true encounter and everything in the game seems stacked against them? They make the move, or the woman bluffs them without tipping their hands into making the move. The guys step out stupidly, it now seems to me, into the space between saying something irreversible and frank, a compliment, or an outright indication of interest. And most of the time, the women step away or laugh disdainfully, and the guys are left with their asses in the wind. That's the sport, and men are the suckers. Women guard the gate, and men storm it. Natural selection is brutal, and women do, in the immortal words of Jim Morrison, seem wicked when you're unwanted. How do you handle all this fucking rejection? I asked Curtis when we sat back down for a post-mortem. Let me tell you a story, he said. When I was in college, there was this guy, Dean, who got laid all the time. I mean, this guy had different women coming out of his room every weekend and most weeknights, and he wasn't particularly good looking. He was fat and kind of a slob. He was a nice guy, though, but nothing special. I couldn't figure out how he did it. So one time, I just fucking asked him, how do you get so many girls to go out with you? He was a man of few words, kind of Coolidge-esque, and if you know what I mean. So all he said was, I get rejected 90% of the time, but it's that 10%. That made us both cackle and pound the table. That's the thing about being a guy, Curtis finished. Rejection is part of the game. It is expected. Not only was dating one of the hardest of Ned's experiences, it was also the most fraught with deception. I was deceiving people on a lot of levels, and the responsible part of me didn't particularly feel good about it. But I also felt the glee of pulling off a performance in the real world, which meant that I was lying, and I was enjoying the lie at someone else's expense. Excuse me. I was deeply involved in a way that might get me and other people hurt. But how hurt were any of us going to get? What? I asked myself, are one of the two dates in the grand scheme of things. I decided I would out myself to anyone with whom I had more than a passing, unsuccessful date or two, which happened with 3 women. With everyone else, I would just be deceitful, but brief. To most of the women I dated, even a date or two meant a lot, especially women who had been out roaming the single scene for years in their mid-30s, trying to find a mate amid the serial daters. Almost inevitably, they were carrying the baggage of previous hurt at the hands of men, which in many cases had prejudiced them unfairly against the male sex. For them, as for so many of us, romantic hurt equaled romantic blame. And because they were exclusive homosexuals, romantic blame was assigned more often to the sex, not the morals of the person inflicting the pain. Bisexuals know that hurt gets inflicted by both sexes in equal measure, if not always by the same means. But for these women who had never dated other women and thus never been romantically hurt by them, men as a subspecies, not the particular men with whom they had been involved, were to blame for the wreck of a relationship and the psychic damage it had done to them. It's hardly surprising, then, that in this atmosphere, as a single man dating women, I often felt attacked, judged, and on the defensive. Whereas with the men I met and befriended as Ned, there was a presumption of innocence. That is, you're a good guy until you prove otherwise. With women, there was quite often a presumption of guilt. You're a cad like every other guy until you prove otherwise. Pass my test, and then we'll see if you're worthy of me, was the implicit message coming across the table at me. And this is from women who had demonstrably little to offer. Be lighthearted, they said, though buoyant as Led Zeppelins themselves. Be kind, they insisted in the harshest of tones. Don't be like the others, they implied, while having virtually condemned me as such beforehand. The bitterest women I met were usually in their mid-30s or older. They've been through the mill a bit, and they probably had more than their share of hellish dates or hit and run relationships before I came along. To hear them tell it, the pool of eligible, mature, stable, reciprocating, emotionally evolved men out there was small and polluted, and having to wade through it when what you wanted most in life was to settle down and start a family would be enough to shorten anyone's fuse. Appreciate you, bro. 20 ball. Thank you. Thank you. I always appreciate y'all's support. Thank y'all for rocking with me. Then again, many of the women I met weren't emotional giants either, nor were they particularly well adjusted or stable. They just considered themselves to be such. And even the ones who knew they were damaged seemed to feel entitled to expect solidity, I don't know what stolidity from a man, as if, in the time honored way of things, a man is supposed to be strong, to hold things together for his woman, to hold her up when she can't do it herself. Ironically, one of the women who was the least well adjusted and the least graceful at dating turned out to be one of the most important of my relationships. Well, let's talk about it then. So solid. I appreciate you, big dog. Appreciate you, man. I arrived on time at my local Starbucks. See, they was having coffee dates back then, y'all. I had met Sasha, as I met most of my dates through a person's website on the internets. We'd exchanged photographs and a number of emails. After a week or so of back and forth, we decided to get together for coffee. A brief encounter that would presumably allow either or both of us to vote if we felt the need, or so I thought. While I approached her table, Sasha was already a good way through a pile of photographs she's obviously just picked up from the pharmacy across the street. I expected her to pocket them the minute I appeared, but instead she began showing them to me. They were of a co-worker's wedding, not a friend or a family member's wedding, mind you, but a co-worker's wedding. She leafed through several rows, pointing out her office acquaintances in the morning coats and off-shoulders dresses, and drunkenly propped against each other, hamming for the camera. This, I thought, was a hostile act. Everyone knows that photographic displays are one of the most boring parts of getting to know anyone, which is why people save them for later, when you actually know some of the people pictured or care enough about the other person to endure the torture. I found out later that this particular woman's train wreck experiences with the opposite sex had taught her to believe that, to men, women were just, as she put it, meat with a pulse. In retrospect, I wonder if this photomat ritual wasn't an elaborate test, Maybe her twisted way of letting me know that if I was just there to get in her knickers, I'd have to do I'd have to do my turn in her holding cell before I get anywhere. Perhaps she had found this to be an effective way of weeding out the louts, but it made me want to bolt. This was only the beginning. After we finished with the photos, she launched into a 2-hour description of her pending divorce and the circumstances that had precipitated it. One of which was an as yet unconsummated affair de cour she was still having with a married man. She was torn up, an obsessive caught in her own pain loop. I felt sorry for her, but then her situation wasn't any worse than a lot of people's. Besides, I felt mighty resentful about having her being dragooned into a therapy session on the first date. Toward the end, I decided that this woman was either most conversationally inconsiderate person I've ever met or the most socially impervious. Whatever the case, she was taking advantage of my good manners. I was going to get a little of my own back before the poor slack-faced coffee minions, who were by now not so subtly hinting at last call by slamming cupboards and rustling trash bags, were forced to hustle us out the door for closing. I was mean. Do you live entirely inside your head? I said finally, or are you aware that there are other people in the world? She thought about this for a second without the slightest hint of having taken any offense, then answered, yes, I guess I do kind of live in my head. Why are you here? I followed. To this, she saw me and raised me one, which I had to admire, because it's better than staring at the walls of my bedroom. Are you disappointed by your life? Oh, I skipped a part. She said, because it's better than staring at my walls in my bedroom. This I could understand and pity. I had been there. Are you disappointed by your life? Again, she paused, computed this, then said, no. I don't remember much of the rest of it. There wasn't much. We got kicked out of the Starbucks, and that was basically that. But her frank answers to my questions had made me realize that I could ask this person almost anything, and that alone was interesting. She was quite happy to converse on whatever level if it kept her engaged and kept her from stewing along. I could learn what her impressions of Ned had been, how he compared with other men she dated, what else she was expecting from a man, and whether cheap therapy was all she was wanting from a second date with Ned, or whether Ned had scored points for being sensitive and a good listener. I told you all this because I wanted to be honest with you from the beginning about where I am, she said. Clearly, she wasn't ready to start dating again. She wasn't looking for a relationship. She was looking for a distraction and an ear to tell her troubles to. She didn't have enough emotional energy left to get seriously involved with Ned, which I saw as a buffer zone between us, making it possible to get to know her as a man without causing too much romantic hardship, if any. I was especially interested in her because she had been involved with a married man and been hurt by the experience. Whatever, nigga. This is a wounded woman's cliche, if ever there was one, and she followed the pattern to the last detail. She had chosen to get involved with someone. She had chosen to get involved with someone who was unavailable, yet she blamed him for refusing to leave his wife. He was the cad, the coward. She was the long-suffering party, the helpmeet waiting in the wings, that the used one who deserved better. Her predicament was of her own making and entirely predictable, yet she used it to bolster her distrust of the opposite sex. And as with many of the other women I dated, Ned took the accumulated load on his shoulders from the start. He was just the next man who would hurt her. How could it be otherwise? When a woman approaches a man armed to the teeth with arterial wounds for which men as a species are presumptively to blame, the man in question has little choice but to fight back. And when everything he says and does is measured against the front-loaded politics of sex, he can't help but shrivel or putrefy under the scrutiny. Sadly, this alienation dynamic, which temporarily unpleasant for me, the man in these cases, worked in the long run far more to the detriment of such women who were not only desperately unhappy, but doing everything to ensure that they would remain so. Their refusal to see men as individuals, and more importantly, to see their initial encounters with them as tabula rasa, doomed them from the start. I ain't gonna say nothing though. I would see more of Sasha's wounds, armor, honesty, and awe. Meanwhile, I went on a lot of dates. I heard a lot of cliches, but I also saw a lot of women who didn't conform to patterns in the least. One middle-aged woman with whom Ned struck up a conversation in a bar summarized one cliche in 3 words: women are enraged. The reason? According to her, a complete and utter emotional disconnect between the sexes. Women wanting and desperately needing more emotional communication and attention, and men being utterly baffled by this need and unable to meet it. It sounded as if she'd been reading Deborah Tannen, who wrote in You Just Don't Understand. Many men honestly do not know what women want, and women honestly do not know why men find what they want so hard to comprehend and deliver. Yet the opposite is equally true, though less often discussed publicly. Let's go, guys. A lot of the women I met didn't know, didn't understand, or didn't appear to care what a lot of men in their lives wanted either. Perhaps women had been guilty of hubris in this regard. We think of ourselves as emotional masters of the universe. In our world, feelings reign. We have them, we understand them, and we cater to them. Men, we think, don't on all counts. But as I learned among my friends in the bowling league and elsewhere, this is absolutely untrue and absurd. Of course, men have a whole range of emotions, just as women do. It's just that many of them are often silent or underground, invisible to most women's eyes and ears. Tannen was right enough on that point. Women and men communicate differently, oftenly on entirely different planes. But just as men have failed us, we have failed them. It has been one of our great collective female shortcomings to presume that whatever we do not perceive simply isn't there, or to whatever is not communicated in our language is not in unintelligible speech. Tap said, what she misses though, we listen to all that BS so we can get that wet. And at some point in between the sex sections, we can decide if we want to take it further. I agree. Women don't know what they want. I ain't saying that. It's funny. We know this already. I think we're more emotional. My boy Mike sent me a message. I ain't gonna say emotional. We more we're more benevolent, right? We're not more emotional, but we care more. You know what I'm saying? We care more. The care you have to be able to, like some women have it, not all. I mean, the majority don't, right? But caring means you worry about people outside yourself, right? Now, I want y'all to really think, right? Really think and be honest, right? How many women do you guys know that care about things that don't affect them outside of them? Just saying. What was that? Ditto for the stereotype about men monopolizing conversations. Like Sasha, many of my dates, even the more passive ones, did most of the talking. I listened to them talk literally for hours about the most minute, mind-numbing details of their personal lives. Men they are still in love with, men they had divorced, roommates and co-workers they hated, childhoods they were loath to remember, yet somehow found the energy to recount ad nauseum. Listening to them was like undergoing a slow frontal lobotomy. I sat there stunned by the social ineptitude of people to whom it never seemed to occur that no one, much less a first date, will have any interest in enduring this ordeal. This was a human, not a male or female, failing. When I wasn't listening to these long laments, I was asking these women's questions about themselves. It was mostly to fill the silences because they rarely ever asked me questions about myself. Dario, was good? I see you fresh. I see you, D. Was good fishing the fit? He be fishing. Dario in the building. When I wasn't listening to these long laments, I was asking these women questions about themselves, mostly to fill the silences, because they rarely asked me questions about myself, or for that matter, made much of an effort to engage in a genuine conversation quid pro quo. Perhaps the art is lost to both sexes. Weren't people supposed to be on their best behavior on first dates? Weren't they supposed to at least pretend an interest in the other person out of politeness, if nothing else? Certainly, that's that's what I was doing, making polite conversation. So much so that I never expected to hear from these people again. I was boring myself. That's the worst part of a bad date. It makes you feel like a toad, and you keep telling yourself, I know I'm more fun than this. And I know that when I came into this cafe, I wasn't in despair about the human condition. Maybe they were just bumbling through as best as they could, knowing that they never contact me again. But to my surprise, many of them did contact me again, enthusiastically. To my mind, my first dates were often so bad that second dates were unthinkable, even in the name of research, except in rare cases where I thought I could learn something useful from posing a series of what under normal a series of what under normal circumstances would have been considered rude questions, but when aimed at the liminally autistic, proved just the ticket to a vaguely interesting conversation. If the most disgruntled woman I met and dated as Ned had ever been attuned to men's signals, by the time I met them, they were long past receiving outside information of any kind. Moreover, if the way they discussed their past and the way they approached me was anything to go by, they seemed incapable of seeing any new man as an individual. Worse still, they seemed to transform each new man, benign or otherwise, into the malignancy they were expecting him to be. They tended to see a wolf in every man they met, and so they made every man they met into a wolf, even when that man was a woman. Not surprising, really. The women who were hostile to me made me mad, and that made me want to be hostile to them. I can't imagine men in the same position not reacting the same way. And so the self perpetuating cycle of unkindness and disconnect would go on, feeding on itself. These women were mostly hostile in the first place because they felt that men's bad behavior had made them so. And the men they met behaved badly because hostility breeds contempt. It wasn't a good recipe for finding a lasting relationship, but I could remember feeling exactly the way it seemed these women did when I was a young woman in and just out of college. I found plenty of ammunition for hating men in Women's Studies 101. Let me say that back again.
Did you hear what I said?
I found plenty of ammunition for hating men in Women's Studies 101. Much of it, like the subjugation and abuse of women historically and even currently, undeniable. What's more, I found plenty of reinforcement for my fledgling misandry in the crass undergraduates I encountered everywhere on campus. I read the textbooks of radical feminism, and following their lead, I thought all males were tainted by the patriarchy. For years thereafter, every guy I met was on probation. But there is nothing like a few years in the trenches trenches of lesbian romance to give a girl a little perspective on the supposed inborn evils of the opposite sex. As time went on, I learned that girls don't behave any better than boys under relational duress, and that centuries of subjugation haven't made women morally superior. Okay, she's starting to talk. She's starting to talk a little bit. That's it for tonight. We got our hour in, ladies and gentlemen. I'm sure there's a lot of other channels that's got some content going on. I was supposed to do the live tomorrow for its absence abuse, but I forgot what's their name. Tonight's conversation is going to be up in the cities, and I got a ticket tomorrow. So I'm going to be up in Minneapolis tomorrow, so I'm not going to be able to do a live. We will be doing that live on Friday. It is an open live, so an open panel. So make sure if y'all want to do that on Friday, come on through. That's if you're available. We're going to examine its absence abuse. I think I asked this question in the live. I did ask it on my Facebook page, right? We're gonna discuss how can absence be abuse. Make sure you bring your argument and make sure you can back it up with some actual experience and facts, because that's where we at. So we'll be back next Wednesday. Next Wednesday with reading. Friday we'll be doing a live. And we'll take it from there. As usual, I appreciate y'all for supporting me. To the super chats, make sure I get those. We got Romello with the $5 ball, just sliding in. My brother Tap, the accountability partner, aka you know who you is, but appreciate you, man. Appreciate the read, man. I appreciate y'all rocking out with me. We got So Solid with the 20 ball, man. Thanks so much, So Solid. I'm gonna make sure I get up with you too, bro. I ain't forget about you. We're gonna finish that talk we was having today. But yeah, man, that's all I got. Y'all know what we do here. Make sure you take care of yourself first. Take care of yourself, because without you, nothing else is possible. If your eyes wasn't here to see it, it wouldn't exist. Believe me when I tell you. Once you do that, take care of your family, because who's going to feed you Jello when you get older? And nigga, I like Jello. You know what I'm saying? Green Jello, red Jello. Shit is fire, right? And after you do that, everything else will take care of itself. Love, peace, and hair grease. Make sure you like the video, share the stream, people. If you got on YouTube channel or Instagram, share the stream. If you got music or products you want me to get out to the people, send it to my DMs, rdubs on Instagram, ARE_dubs, right? Shout out to my boy So Solid for allowing me to honor or playing his video. Make sure y'all get it, my boy So Solid the Prophet, on all streaming platforms. That's Apple Music, that's Spotify, that's Tidal. If it's music there, he there. Make sure y'all get at him. Let's get his streams up, right? Be funky with it. And with that being said, I love y'all. Have a great night. We're gonna make it a great morning. I appreciate y'all. And we out.